Good evening, Africa, and a Happy New Year to Ethiopian brothers. Yes, it is a Happy New Year in the land of the great Empire Haile Selassie, who have just ushered in the year 2010, according to the Amharic calendar. Salam once again. You are in time for yet another educating episode of Bottomline Africa, on a day where the world is also commemorating the September 11th attack on the World Trade Center in New York, the change geopolitical security management. Welcome to the program. My name is Yusuf Ibrahim. We'll also catch up with what is happening in the world's youngest nation, that is South Sudan, with latest concerns from international aid workers. In studio, I have Jason Straz, also is ICRC regional spokesman. As well as here in Kenya, there's a story we are following for you, and that has everything to do with IEBC. At a time, the commissioners have gone for a retreat in Naivasha. Sophia Nuna is going to talk to me shortly and tell me more from there. And in Uganda, Solomon Serawanja is going to tell us more on that brutal killings that is happening in Uganda. He's going to explain that for us shortly. But first things first, a quick look at Africa in 60 seconds. 10 soldiers among the latest casualties of a suspected Al-Shabaab strike at a military base in Somalia. 2 Kenyan legislators from opposing political coalitions locked in over hate-mongering. The International Red Cross is to review its operations in South Sudan following the killing of an aid worker over the weekend. And we engage in a candid conversation about how the media in Africa have covered electoral processes in the continent. Welcome, Africa. Once again, if you're just joining us, the program begins right now. On our Twitter poll tonight, we are asking you, what are your thoughts about media coverage of electoral processes in Africa? Let me just take that again. What are your thoughts about media coverage of electoral processes in Africa? You know the drill. Our Twitter handle is at KTN News. You can as well tweet me at Yusuf Ibra. And remember to use the hashtag Bottomline Africa. And that question tonight is going to form the basis of our discussion. We'll have a panel consisting of Nakia White. Nakia White is a communication strategist. Koki Robbie Ochieng, who is a journalism lecturer at the USIU Africa. And as well as Omoyo Moyo, who is the CEO of the Media Council of Kenya. We'll have that discussion shortly. But we want to begin from right here in Kenya, where police have arrested a member of parliament and a former senator of alleged hate remarks made during their post-election season in the run-up to a presidential rerun. Gatundu South, member of parliament Moses Kuria and former Machakos Senator Johnson Muthama will be spending their night in police custody after being detained earlier in the day. Ironically, this is not the first time the duo have been arrested for such utterances. Leaders from the opposition NASA coalition, led by their presidential candidate Raila Odinga, summed at the Pangani police station until this evening in an attempt to secure their release. The two were arrested today and interrogated at the Directorate of Criminal Investigation before being booked at the Pangani police station. The NASA coalition has cited ulterior motives behind Muthama's arrest.
Anybody business mambo hii hate speech nini, we have been threatening people, oh, we will take action. Now we have stopped talking about what we are going to do. We will do it. Na mutaona tu tukifanya.
I cannot go and hang a person if he or she has not committed an offense. And I can't know whether somebody has committed an offense if I have not investigated. This is a country that is run through law.
One of our chief campaigners, Honorable Johnson Muthama, has been arrested and brought in here and locked up for no good reason. We have not been told why he has been arrested. I have talked to the Inspector General of Police, Mr. Boynet, who was very, very rude to me. did. And he tells me that Mr. Mudama has been arrested because of a crime unknown to him.
Meanwhile, the Naivasha retreat by the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission is just wound up, with the chair of Fula Chebukati giving assurances that they have ironed out their internal misunderstanding and are now ready for the October 17th presidential election. The commission now heads back to the capital, Nairobi, to meet political players in an effort to seek consensus on some of the sticky issues before the election rerun. He also addressed the issue on the memo he wrote to the IEBC CEO, Ezra Chiloba. This is what he had to say earlier. Listen.
The Secretariat have addressed the issues in the memo. The Commission will meet in the course of the week to review those answers, and thereafter we shall communicate the same to the country. So we have not reviewed the answers yet. We are yet to review the answers to that memo.
All right, so the project team you'd announced earlier, you mentioned that the CEO will now announce another or set up one. So you're doing away with the one you'd set up before?
Now, just to tell us more from Naivasha, we're now joined by my colleague Sophia Wanuna. Sophia, good evening. Welcome to the program. What can you tell Africa? Are we finally seeing is white smoke from IEBC?
Good evening.
We apologize for that. We're going to link up with Sophia once we sort that technical hitch out. And the world is now today marking 16 years since the Twin Tower attacks at the World Trade Center. But before we focus on that story, let me return you back to Sophia. Sophia, apologies for that. So you can continue with your update now.
All right, apologies for that, Yusuf. Indeed, as you said, white smoke billowing from Naivasha tonight. The commission, led by the chairperson, that is Wafula Chebukati, accompanied by the rest of the commissioners, as well as the CEO of IEBC, Ezra Chiloba, tonight saying, we are one. And they're ready now, after having ironed out the issues following that fallout last week. They're now ready to focus on the repeat presidential poll on the 17th of October. That's just about slightly over a month. So the hatchet has been buried, as you heard from that clip earlier of the chairperson saying that memo has been responded to. They will be reviewing the issues therein. As also, we saw the chairperson just maintaining tonight and reassuring the country that all is well and that the CEO is very much in charge, and as far as that project team that had been named earlier, saying that now that will be overseen by the CEO. He will review and streamline in accordance to the needs and requirements ahead of the 17th of October. Also, we saw the chair disabuse the notion of those allegations we've heard about bias on the part of the commissioners and the CEO as well, saying that they are neutral and that anybody who has any evidence or of any other meetings there may have been or any alliances that are not in order should make that evidence or bring it forward or make the same known publicly with evidence to back it up, not just make him to talk about it. So seemingly a united commission this evening, Ibrahim, and so we'll wait to see as they continue in the days ahead of for the preparations for that 17th October election. As you mentioned as well, tomorrow there will be meeting parties from NASA as well as Jubilee to iron out also some of the issues they raised in the lead up and run up to this repeat poll. Ibrahim.
Clearly, that's a good signal we're seeing from the IEBC there. Many thanks, Sophia, for that comprehensive update. I know you've had a very long day. We still need you tomorrow for much more updates from Naivasha. Many thanks, Sophia, for that. Now, the world is today marking 16 years since the Twin Tower attacks at the World Trade Center by Al-Qaeda militants. Ironically, the world is still dealing with cases of violent extremism several years down the line. Now, the latest incident is that of suspected Al-Shabaab militia who earlier today attacked a Somali military base and police station near the border with Kenya, killing at least 8 soldiers. The Al-Shabaab militants rammed the base in Beledhawa town with an explosives-packed vehicle and then stormed it on foot. Mahmoud Haid Osman added, that is, of course, eyewitness. Now, Al-Shabaab said it had killed 30 soldiers in the hit-and-run attack. It has carried out a spate of attacks in Somalia and Kenya since launching an insurgency more than a decade ago. The African Union has an 18,000-strong force helping the UN-backed Somali government tackle the militants.
Risasi alafu pia na milipuko, ndipo tukapigiana masimu na ikathibitishwa kwamba walikuwa wamevamiwa na wanamgambo wa Al-Shabaab.
Now, in the meantime, the African Union has honored a contingent of Nigerian police officers for its role in securing peace in Somalia. The officers who have completed their tour of duty were awarded medals and certificates at a ceremony held in Mogadishu. Speaking at the function, AMISOM African Union Mission in Somalia Police Commissioner Brigadier General Anand Pillay hailed the officers for their efforts in aiding Somalia hold a successful transition.
Ayo DG Johnson.
We've done well there in terms of supporting the Somali police to ensure the elections were conducted successfully. And it's thanks to each one of you because you're always at the center of everything, including the inauguration of the president. So thank you for the job well done.
Now, Ethiopia is today in a celebratory mood, ushering in a new year. Yes, you heard me right. But the heads of the 3 UN food agencies visiting the country have highlighted the critical food and nutrition security situation in the worst affected parts of Ethiopia. Rains have failed for the 3rd consecutive year, and more than 8.5 million people require food assistance in the second half of 2017.
And this is a consequence of 3 years successful year impact of El Niño in that zone. So they don't have water available for their animals. They have little water, and there is nothing at all.
In a country like Ethiopia, where you have a double-digit growth, at the same time having to face the challenge of a prolonged drought, it brings to surface the importance of making sure that our growth strategy are very much inclusive.
But because of the collaborative spirit, we've been able to avert famine, but the conditions are very bleak. But if we can continue to partner together, and if our donors will stay with us, we will be able to continue to avert famine, but that is not the long-term solution, though, as you well know.
Of course, despite the challenges, Happy New Year to Ethiopian brothers. Now, the International Committee of the Red Cross, that is ICRC, has condemned the killing of one of its drivers who was shot dead when a convoy of their vehicles was ambushed in South Sudan's Western Equatoria state. Now, the ICRC said Lukuru Kennedy Lucky Emmanuel was killed when the convoy of 9 trucks and a 4-wheel drive vehicle was shot at by unidentified gunmen while returning from Western Equatoria on Friday. Now, ICRC's head of delegation in Juba, Frances Tam, said the team was shaken and distraught by the killing of their colleague who was traveling in a convoy of vehicles which were clearly marked with the Red Cross emblem. Now, the ICRC driver died after helping to deliver aid to victims of the armed conflict in Western Equatoria region. The ICRC said it is assessing the implication of this killing on its operations in the area.
Under trees. And now we need peace. Talk for peace because I want South Sudan to come back for peace. Yeah, we are praying for peace.
Children that are 2 weeks or 3 weeks old and have walked up to 2 or 3 days to be here. So they come from a distance and they're in desperate need for food, humanitarian aid in general. Despite the signature of the peace agreement, which everybody has welcomed, of course, the situation remains very bleak. People are very afraid, people still displaced to this day. There has been reports of fighting around the country, and so that instability leads to people having lost entirely their coping mechanisms, be it their crops, be it their cattle, be it their homes. Oftentimes they're separated from their loved ones.
Meanwhile, South Sudanese youth and women held a peace concert aimed at highlighting positive activities and efforts to end the ongoing violence in the country. The concert featured dances and songs as well as plays that touched on some of the challenges the women and youth face, the impact of violence against women, as well as the need to hold offenders to account as war rages in South Sudan. The event was supported by the United Nations mission in South Sudan, well known as UNMISS. Organizers said it was important to remind the country on the important role that women play in supporting their families and in building peace.
Through us women, peace can come because we are the peacemakers. In the houses, we are the one who are now taking care of our children. We are the one taking care of our husband. The fighting is killing our neighbors. So we have to be careful and we have to be out of the conflict.
We would all agree that without peace, we cannot develop. Without peace, the children cannot be educated. Without peace, we cannot go to the farms to be able to provide food for ourselves and on the table. So it is my prayer that the government will continue to promote peace.
We will recommit ourselves to bringing lasting peace in this part of South Sudan. We are going to recommit all what we are doing to the full implementation of all resolutions that were brought forward by different committees to see to it that peace, security, and tranquility is brought back to this peaceful land.
And just to tell us on how the situation is like on the ground in the youngest nation in Africa, that is South Sudan, I'm now joined in studio by Jason Straz-Uso, who is the ICRC regional spokesman. Many thanks for joining us at this hour.
Hi, Yusuf. Thanks for being here.
And of course, our condolences to what happened to one of your colleagues in South Sudan. So we've heard there from your colleague in South Sudan. She clearly indicated that ICRC is going to review its operation in South Sudan. Are we seeing a situation where you're going to paralyze or suspend the operations in South Sudan?
Well, with this killing of one of our truck drivers, in fact, who was delivering an aid to the Equatoria's area that you've mentioned, we now need to assess the situation, ensure that the situation on the ground is safe. The ICRC has operated in South Sudan safely for decades. This is the first death of one of our staff members in at least 17 years, and this looks like it was a deliberate killing, so it's a very serious situation that we have to look at.
So at this moment you've suspended the operations in just the equatorial area, not just the entire South Sudan?
That's right. In this region where this attack took place, we're going to pause and take a look and make sure the situation is safe. That, of course, means that all the people in that region that we were assisting with food or medical care or household items, they are still in need. And that's an unfortunate consequence when humanitarian workers are attacked like this, are targeted. The people who are in need suffer.
And focusing on this killing, what does it mean? You know, how have the other humanitarian agencies in South Sudan, I'm sure it's not just ICRC that is operating in South Sudan, how have they taken in this news? Have they also suspended the operations in this equatorial area?
Well, I wouldn't want to speak for other organizations, but you do touch on something important, that once a violent incident happens, all the organizations in the country look at that area carefully. They don't want to put anyone in danger. It really freezes the assistance that's taking place. I might mention that in South Sudan this year, the ICRC has seen an increase in violence. That's really unfortunate, 3.5 years into this latest bout of violence there. That means that when we are trying to assist people, we actually have to chase them. They are moving away from violence or from oncoming troops. And whatever food assistance we were providing or medical assistance we were providing, we have to sort of put that on pause and then go find the people in need. And as your viewers probably know, there are 6 million people in need of food aid in South Sudan this year. There was a famine declared earlier this year. 6 million people is half the population of South Sudan.
That's a crisis already.
4 million people have had to flee their homes. That's 1/3 of the country. So sometimes we forget South Sudan is violent again or still, but the numbers are huge and staggering. And to get back to your point, when you have an attack, a death of a Red Cross worker who's a humanitarian just trying to assist, then it really interrupts all the work from our organization and others that is trying to be done.
And I'm sure you are in constant communication with some of your staff members in South Sudan. Can you give our viewers a rough picture of how the situation is like in South Sudan? Because we're getting reports that this is not just a rival between Riek Machar and Salva Kiir. There are also other factions that have come up.
It's an extremely complicated situation. You did name the two most well-known parts of the conflict, but as you say, there are lots of armed groups there, to people that may not, we don't know who they're allied to. And what that does is it takes a lot of work by our organization to establish trust and communication and go to someone who may be in charge of an area and say, can we operate here safely? Do you accept our presence? There are people in this region that need medical assistance and can't get it any other way, and we would like to work there. It is complicated.
Understand, you work with the humanitarian agencies. Let's avoid the politics surrounding there. But what is basically the bone of contention? People are wondering why South Sudan is still fighting. They started fighting right after they attained the independence.
Yeah, the independence was in 2011, and this latest round of fighting began in 2013. You saw a split between two of the major political figures in the country, and our work has been to move into the areas where we can on either side of those lines, assisting with medical, assisting with food.
So the question is this about resources in South Sudan? Are they fighting over resources?
Well, actually, the Red Cross, we don't seek to analyze the situation because, believe it or not, the Red Cross is not a peace organization. We recognize that fighting happens. What we try to do is move into an area where violence is taking place and remind all the parties taking part in that conflict that civilians, that women and children, even men that are not fighting, they should not be targeted in that conflict. They should not be a part of it. The Red Cross's position is that the fighting should take place only between armed actors, the warring sides. That's one of the problems in South Sudan is so many civilians are being affected by the fighting.
Now, moving forward, does it mean ICRC officials are going to be manned by security officers as well?
That is not something we do in South Sudan, and we don't want to do it. We don't want to be seen as an armed actor that could be associated with any of the sides. We want to be able to move in between. We want to do it safely, which is why this killing of Mr. Emmanuel, a truck driver with 7 children, a tragic case, is so alarming for us. It really makes our work more difficult.
Is there a hope that these individuals who, of course, eyeing powers in South Sudan are going to resolve their issues anytime soon?
Our president, President Peter Maurer, the head of the International Committee of the Red Cross, was in South Sudan 2 weeks ago. He met with President Salva Kiir. He met with President Museveni in Uganda. And he did urge the regional powers to find a way to resolve the crisis in the view that it affects so many civilians. We're not predicting any resolution, but we would like to see one so that there is less suffering.
Of course, it's something that the whole of East Africa and Africa as well, and the world will want to see. Many thanks, Jason, for your input.
Thank you.
Of course, that was Jason Straz. Also, he's the ICRC regional spokesman, telling us more about what is happening in the youngest nation in Africa, that is South Sudan. Now, a spate of unsolved murders of young women in Uganda is putting rare public pressure on a police force long accused by opposition politicians of spending more time suppressing political dissent than tackling crime in the country.
A number of unsolved murders of women in recent weeks has put police in Uganda on the spot for not being able to apprehend those behind the gruesome murders. Widespread media coverage of the appearance of 20 corpses on the roadsides south of the capital since May reflects public anger with police for repeatedly saying they have arrested the perpetrators only for another body to be discovered. We live in fear. We cannot cultivate our farms anymore because we are scared of being attacked while at work. The government has defended the police, who say they have arrested 30 suspects and charged 13 of them, listing possible motives ranging from domestic rows through sexual abuse to ritual murder linked to human sacrifice.
We increased our community policing, which is the mechanism of getting in touch with the people more. We increased our patrols, focused patrols, both motorized and foot, and of course supported by the community in these areas.
In a nod to the public outrage, lawmakers stopped work for 2 days last week after the 20th body was discovered, saying ministers had failed to appear before the legislature over the killings in 3 districts.
I refuse to simply accept that all these are related to domestic violence, because Ugandans have not just started living together, man and woman, and all of a sudden they have discovered a new trick of settling domestic issues.
Residents suspect the murder victims are killed elsewhere and their bodies later dumped. Janet Chapia, KTN News.
Of course, that was a report by Janet Chapia there. Now, just to tell us more from Kampala, Uganda, I'm now joined by my colleague Solomon Serawanja. Solomon, good evening. Rights group are accusing the police of neglecting crime and, focusing more on, political control. And we're seeing these brutal killings going on in Uganda. What more can you tell us from there?
Well, a very good evening to you, Yusuf. Now, President Yoweri Museveni has always been taking pride in securing Ugandans and their property for a couple of years, but ask any security expert and they'll tell you that Ugandans have a reason to doubt, because there's been sporadic killings across the country in districts like Wakiso. In Entebbe alone, just in a couple of months, that's 2 months, a total of about 9 women have been murdered, and across the country about 21 people have been murdered in just a space of 60 days. Think about that. Now, it is very tricky for President Yoweri Museveni, because he always says we defeated the LRA in northern Uganda. We have also taken troops to Somalia to fight the Al-Shabaab, but down here at home, it remains a very, very big question for him to solve. The sporadic killings, remember, we've had murders before in this country, and Ugandans are saying that this should stop. Why hasn't the president and President Yoweri Museveni's regime handled and tackled the issue of security, Yusuf? Now, that outcry has only fallen on deaf ears, because just recently, while asked to explain the recent murders in the country, the Internal Affairs Minister, Jeje Odong, while appearing in Parliament, said it is something related to Illuminati. Now, to many Ugandans, that sounded like a joke, but the general of the Uganda People's Defense Forces, who is also the Internal Affairs Minister, appearing before members of Parliament, did say that it is related to witchcraft, so to speak, or devil worshipping, something that did not sound very well to many Ugandans who are calling for justice on the blood of women that has been spilled with no justifiable reason. Yusuf.
A very sad incident indeed, Solomon. We do hope the Ugandan authorities are going to jump into action and, bring these perpetrators to justice. Many thanks, Solomon, for that update. And that update from Solomon Serawanja, who is in Kampala, Uganda, brings us to the end of our first first part of our program, that is Bottomline Africa. We're going to take a very short break, but when we come back, we'll have the discussion surrounding our topic tonight, and it has everything to do with how media has been covering electoral processes, not just in Kenya, but in Africa as a whole. I'm sure you don't want to miss that discussion. We'll take a very short break, then we'll be coming back right after this. Don't go too far.